Mabuhay everyone. I am Owen. And we are going to talk about broadening one's perspective on life with the help of the different schools of philosophy. Broadening one's perspective helps in the development of higher-order thinking skills and in the long-run wisdom. To broaden one's perspective is to be open to different but essential views. As such, it is of great help in broadening one's perspective to learn from significant philosophical thoughts. Presented are basic tenets from known philosophical perspectives. Let us explore the tenets of different schools of philosophy to broaden our perspective. This lesson focuses on the following. 1. Comparative analysis of Western and Eastern philosophy. 2. Basic tenets of the schools of philosophy, especially on human nature. 3. Filipino philosophy on Loob, Gulong ng Palad, and Bahala na. Before we delve into the discussion, let us look into the guide questions. These are: 1. Why is it beneficial to broaden our perspective? 2. What are the ways to broaden our perspective? 3. How does comparing the two traditional centers of philosophical thoughts broaden our perspective on the basics of philosophy? 4. How do the significant tenets of the different schools of philosophy broaden our perspective on human nature and life? 5. How do the Filipino thoughts on Loob, Gulong ng Palad, and Bahala na broaden our perspective on Filipino philosophy? Try to answer them. They will be presented during the discussion of each topic. Our perspective on and understanding of the world in which we live has a significant impact on our attitude, our mood, and ultimately the energy we emit into the universe. Unbelievably, the greater our perspective, which is defined as a mental outlook, a cognitive orientation, a method of seeing a situation or a scene, the more truth we bring into our lives, the less misinformed we become, and the overall richer our lives become. Since it broadens our own perspective, opening our minds to varied viewpoints has many positive effects. While there is no guarantee that it will change our ideas, at the absolute least, it will keep us educated and conscious so that we can explore and interact with people more efficiently and politely. Let's examine the advantages of having a broad viewpoint. 1. It enhances creativity. Our creativity is sparked and can ignite into some of the most unexpected innovations when we open our minds to new ways of thinking, whether by working with others who have different experiences or come from different cultures or backgrounds, or by simply reading and gaining new knowledge that opens up a new world of ideas to us. 2. It broadens understanding. The ability to see things from other viewpoints is one of the greatest blessings of exploring. We learn that there are many different approaches to leading fulfilling lives after spending time in exploring experiences, situations, beliefs, philosophical thoughts, etc. We may start to improve our understanding of why people pick the life routes they do after we acknowledge this life reality. Not everyone will follow a similar road as ours or think that our conception of the ideal existence is correct. 3. It enhances tolerance. Even though it is not the road we have chosen, as we learn to comprehend how and why others live their lives, our tolerance grows because we avoid making harmful assumptions. Civility in society improves when we appreciate our diversity rather than passing judgment on how others choose to spend their lives. Realizing there is no one way to have a fulfilling life can be rather liberating. 4. It eradicates stereotypes. We create stereotypes in our minds that can prevent us from seeing the world as it actually is when we base our understanding of cultures or ethnicities different than our own on what is depicted on television or said by ignorant people in our daily lives. A stereotype is wrong, oversimplified, and fixed by definition, whereas as people, we are all always changing, growing, and evolving. We start to realize the fallacy of clinging to preconceptions as we start introducing ourselves to new people, other experiences, and lifestyles. 5. It minimizes aggression. It's a popular saying that hurt people, but if one of the parties to a possible confrontation is aware of this reality, what might have escalated into violence can potentially be avoided. We avoid interacting with hostile people when they are acting in such a way toward us. We did this to reduce more suffering and to know that we couldn't select for them to get the care they needed. But each of us is what matters most. If we can see beyond ourselves and extend our viewpoint, we may be able to, at the very least, stop something bad from happening and, at the very best, comfort someone who probably needs it more than they realize. 6. It improves interpersonal ties. When we try to put ourselves in shoes of others and try to understand the situation from their point of view, whether it be a disagreement with our partners, a co-worker, or a customer, we give a successful interaction a chance. Connection is strengthened when we avoid getting involved in a potentially heated argument with the intention of winning and instead try to understand and find a middle ground. 7. It improves our capacity for problem solving. The more we are aware of and comprehend, the more resources we have at our disposal to address the numerous challenges and conundrums that arise in daily life. If things don't go exactly as we had hoped, it doesn't necessarily mean there isn't another way to get where we want to go. No issue will go unresolved if creative thought, a comprehensive understanding of how things might operate, and a variety of life experiences are employed. 8. It gets rid of pointless stress. A broad view will help us be ready for the unexpected. We may feel a little anxious knowing that we have little control over unanticipated events, but we can reduce this anxiety by being well prepared. In this case, gaining as much knowledge about the situation or conditions that we are living will help us broaden our perspective. The decision to broaden our perspective has several advantages. The world will always be evolving, thus the chances to do so will never end. So long as we keep asking questions, we will never stop learning. Thus our viewpoint will never stop expanding. It is a gift to ourselves. Similar to Plato's allegory of the cave, when we decide to venture outside the cave and into the sunlight, the intense light may at first seem intimidating and we may feel compelled to retreat to the cave, where it is secure. However, by avoiding the reality the world has to give, we do ourselves no favors. We must look for the sun, knowledge, and a more comprehensive understanding of the human race. And when we do, we not only raise the standard of living in our own lives but also of the world. Having justified the benefits of having a broad perspective, how then do we accomplish this? Here are simple ways to broaden one's perspective. 1. Meditate. Meditation improves awareness of oneself and concentration. Everything becomes clear when we are in a relaxed state of meditation. At this point, our creativity shows itself, and our thinking improves. Meditation allows us to concentrate on our ideas and on ourselves. It helps us clear our mind and cleanse our thoughts. 2. Reflect. Self-reflection is actively looking at our thoughts, attitudes and behaviors to understand our impact on ourselves and others. We develop empathy for others when we look within at who we are. When attempting to comprehend the causes of conflict or resistance and progressing toward a more self-compassionate state, reflecting can be immensely helpful. Reflecting promotes self-awareness, allows us to broaden our perspective, and helps us mature. 3. Socialize. To socialize is to interact with others and gain knowledge from their experiences. Every person on the earth is battling or dealing with something. Meeting new individuals teaches us a lesson in life that keeps us grounded. Our narcissism disappears, our perspective broadens, and we begin to consider others' best interests. 4. Learn. Gain new knowledge. Study the tenets of great philosophers. Attend seminars. Read. By learning, we can increase our knowledge, deepen our comprehension, and cultivate an open mind, all of which help us see the world from a larger perspective. Learning new things allows us to live without regrets, which is ultimately a fantastic accomplishment. 5. Philosophize. To philosophize is to discover, to explore, and to discuss about subjects such as the meaning of life, the nature of the human person, and the like. Philosophizing enhances our perspective on different subjects. Having discussed these ways to broaden perspective, let us apply them. As mentioned, one of the best ways to broaden one's perspective is to philosophize and learn from the wise. As such, we will be discussing well-known schools of philosophy to enhance our perspective on life and nature of the human person. But before going further, let us explore first the two centers of philosophical thoughts for better understanding. Traditionally, philosophical thoughts are categorized based on the two great original centers, namely Oriental or Eastern and Occidental or Western thoughts. For better appreciation of these philosophical thoughts, we are to compare these centers of philosophy on the basis of attitudinal imperatives. These are pattern of life and death, distinction of philosophy and religion, acceptance of the validity of intuition with mysticism. Occidental thinking of life and death is linear because there is the beginning and end. That birth signifies beginning and death signifies ending. In contrast to the linear mindset of the Occident, the Oriental thoughts run in a circular manner. The end connects to the beginning, and the beginning joins the end in a cycle. Death leads to life and life leads to death. This cyclical thought is best described by the concept of samsara or rebirth or reincarnation. The Orient, in their orientation of the distinction between philosophy and religion, does not make rigorous distinction of these two. Most of ancient Oriental philosophical thoughts become religious doctrines and bases of religious rituals and ceremonies. It does not separate philosophy that is thought from religion that is life in action. For the Orient, philosophy is religion and religion is philosophy. Taken as an example on this are the teachings of Buddha, which can be seen as philosophical teachings and religious tenets at the same time. The Occident, on the other hand, perceive philosophy to be distinct from religion. Greek philosophers clearly identify the difference of their teachings from religious beliefs, such that Greek philosophers tried to explain things in the light of reason instead of allowing myths to shed light on things. If logic is no longer able to explain matters of the world, the Orient resorts to intuition. It is no surprise that Asian mind has propensity to mysticism, and to the use of superconsciousness. Mysticism and superconsciousness are reflected in the practice and belief of Asians to meditation and yoga. The Occident, however, has to theorize and speculate in situations in which the human mind does not have yet the logical answer on something. Various forms of philosophy developed throughout history. Some of these schools of philosophy are forgotten, but most remain because of their great impact to man's thinking and civilization. Studying them will broadening our perspective as long as we utilize our holistic perspective. The discussion of the topic will be divided into the Eastern schools of philosophy, Western schools of philosophy, and a separate exploration to the Filipino philosophy. Let us start exploring classical schools of philosophy from the East. These are Buddhism, Confucianism, and Taoism. The philosophy of Buddhism originated from the Siddhartha's enlightenment, thus becoming the Buddha, which means the enlightened. With his enlightenment came the basic teachings of Buddhism, namely the three marks of existence, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Paths. The three marks of existence are the basis and root of the Four Noble Truths. It includes anicca, anatta, and dukkha. The first mark of existence is anicca or impermanence. It emphasizes that everything existent lacks continuity and it will never last. The second mark of existence is anatta, translated as no self or soul. It explains that there is in humans no permanent, underlying substance that can be called the soul. Instead, the individual is compounded of 5 factors: physical forms, ideation, feeling, mental forms and consciousness, that are constantly changing. The third mark of existence is dukkha, which means suffering, and that suffering exists to assail us. Very much connected to the three mark of existence is the Buddhist tenets on the Four Noble Truths. This tenet explains the nature of suffering and its impact to man's life. The Four Noble Truths include dukkha, samudaya, nirodha, and magga. Dukkha emphasizes the reality of the existence of suffering, that there is an unpleasant and dark side to life. Few to mention are pain, sickness, hunger, poverty, and finally death. In addition, there are also feelings that torture the soul, which includes anger, greed, frustration, hate, jealousy, and disappointments. Samudaya exposes the cause of suffering, which is selfish desire. Suffering goes deeply into clinging or attaching oneself to things that do not last, such as wealth, power, status, fame, etc. As a result, it ends content and happiness with more cravings, frustration, and anger, which lead to more suffering. The Naroda teaches that suffering can be ended by ending the cause of suffering. Utmost liberation, called nirvana, can be achieved by ending cravings and wants. Magga recommends the way to end suffering, which is to follow a defined path. This path is the Noble Eightfold Paths. The Eightfold Paths are categorized into Panna, means wisdom, Sila, which is morals and virtue, and Samadhi talks on focus and meditation. Panna includes samadhi, or right understanding. This means understanding the true essence of the Four Noble Truth. Most of all, seeing it from an angle of truth. Samasanskapa, or right thought, is channeling the mind in the right direction, ensuring it yearns for true enlightenment. Sila covers samavaka, or right speech, which emphasizes that one's words should instill peace, love, and harmony. In other words, desist from lying, gossip, and hurtful talks. Samakamanda, or right conduct or action, is doing good deeds by borrowing a leaf from the 5 Buddhist precepts, which are do not kill, lie, steal, misuse sex, or take alcohol. Sama ajiva, or right livelihood, that is to earn and support yourself honestly. Hence, do not step on the toes of any being while doing this, animals included. Samadhi includes samavayama, or right effort. This is channeling one's energy toward the promotion of good thought and acts. As a result, one need not feed bad thoughts to grow once seated. Samasati, or right mindfulness, is paying detailed attention, becoming more aware of the body, states of the mind, our feelings. Most importantly, feeding it with positive energy to strengthen positive attributes and fade opposing ones. Samasamadhi, or right concentration, is a core practice in meditation. It aims to study the mind's focus towards good and positive transforming attributes. Basically, it involves the 4 stages of deeper concentration. Considering the Buddhist tenets of the 3 marks of existence, the 4 Noble Truths, and the Noble Eightfold Paths, Buddhism illustrates the nature of the human person as no self, translated as anatma, or no atman, because there is nothing solid or permanent about reality. Man is not really a being or a substance, but a becoming or an event. Realizing the self as a becoming leads to compassion, the most important Buddhist virtue. Confucianism is the way of life propagated through the teachings of the Chinese philosopher Confucius, who lived in the 6th century BC China. He left behind a powerful legacy in the form of numerous ideas which are still held in great respect. Most of his teachings are reflected in the Analects and the 5 Classics. The Analects, or Lanya, was compiled based on the master's sayings. The sayings of the Analects reveal Confucius's personality, his ambitions, his fears, his joys, his commitments, and above all his self-knowledge. The 5 Classics, or Wujing, can be described in terms of 5 visions: metaphysical, political, poetic, social, and historical. The metaphysical vision, expressed in the Jing, the classic of changes, explains the cosmos as great transformation of opposing yet complementary forces, the yin and the yang. Thus a person, inspired by the harmony and creativity of the cosmos, must emulate the pattern by aiming to realize the highest ideal of unity of man and heaven, the Tianren, through ceaseless self-exertion. The political vision, contained in the Shujing, the classic of history, presents the ethical foundation for a humane government, in which politics means moral persuasion, and the purpose of the government is not only to provide and maintain order but also to educate. The poetic vision, contained in the Shujing, the classic of poetry, underscores the Confucian valuation of common human feelings. The basic theme of that poetic world is mutual responsiveness. The social vision, contained in the Ligi, the record of rights, shows society as a community of trust with emphasis on communication. As a contributing member of the cooperation, each person is obligated to recognize the existence of others and to serve the public good. The historical vision, presented in the Chancho, the Spring and Autumn Annals, emphasizes the significance of collective memory for communal self-identification. Confucianism envisions man to become a gentleman who is simply a man of virtue. His basic virtues are humility, sincerity, graciousness, magnanimity, and diligence. The nature of a gentleman as a superior man is a man at his best, and a portrayer of authentic manhood. Taoism, which is believed to be founded by a legendary and historical figure Lao Jia or Lao Tse. The teachings of Tuim are compiled in the Tao Te Ching. The centrality of Tao Te Ching and Taoism is the Tao, an abstract concept which is translated as the way. The Tao refers to the natural order and progression of the universe. It is unified, eternal and indescribable. Taoism describes nature as the interaction of two opposite but complementary forces, which is emphasized throughout the Tao Te Ching. The goal of Taoism is to harmonize oneself with the Tao, and therefore with nature and with the universe. The human nature is aligned with the rest of the nature. However, man has the tendency to deviate from the natural order. If men deviate from the alignment, they invite destruction. However, if man is aligned with nature, the results are harmony, balance and order. From this Taoist's tenet, the purpose of self-cultivation is to return to a mode of existence that is natural. Concepts of human nature in Taoism are thus intimately connected with the body. Taoist principles view illness as a lack of alignment, or harmony, within the body. An imbalance of yin and yang within the body can prevent qi from flowing freely, which, in turn, causes pain and physical illness. Thus, acupuncture adjusts flow of qi as it moves through the meridians of the body. The concepts of natural flow are applied in encouraging appropriate behavior through modeling. If an appropriate behavior is modeled, people naturally follow. Having explored the classical Eastern schools of philosophy, let us discover the famous Western schools of philosophy. For this discussion, we looked into the tenets of the following schools of philosophy: Naturalism, Idealism, Pragmatism. The well-known naturalists are John Dewey, Ernest Nagel, Sidney Hook, and Roy Wood Sellers. The basic tenet of naturalism contends that the ultimate reality is nature or matter, and not mind or spirit. Nature is inherent, self-sufficient entity, self-determined and governed by its own laws. Thus, naturalists have regard for actual facts, actual situations and realities. As such, for the naturalists there is inherent goodness in man. Man is born rational. The naturalists, thus, have idolized man. To naturalists, instincts are responsible for all our activities, biological, psychological or social. Values of life, according to naturalism, are created by the human needs. Man must submit himself to the laws of nature. Plato, René Descartes, Benedict Spinoza, Gottfried Leibniz, Immanuel Kant, George Berkeley, and G.W.F. Hegel are the famous idealists. Idealism emphasizes that the ultimate reality is spiritual or mental because reality is to be found in man's mind rather than in material nature. Ideas are more important than objects since they are eternal and unchanging. Idealism considers two forms of the world: the material and the spiritual. It emphasizes that the spiritual world is real and the ultimate truth, whereas the material world is transitory and mortal. Furthermore, it considers that material is destructive and mortal. On the contrary, the spiritual world is a world of ideas, feelings and ideals, the knowledge of which reveals the reality of mind and soul. Thus, according to idealism, only spiritual world is the essence of reality, which is undying, immortal and true. Idealists believe that essential unity is implicit in all diversities. This implicit unifying factor is spiritual and may be called universal consciousness or divinity, who is God, the supreme force which is omnipresent and omnipotent. To idealists, man being spiritual is a supreme creation, thus, he or she is endowed with higher intellectual powers and shows greater levels of intelligence and discrimination. This nature of human helps him or her to mold and modify his surroundings and circumstances. As such, the prime aim of life is to achieve spiritual values, truth, beauty and goodness, which are undying and permanent. The realization of these values is the realization of God. For the achievement of these spiritual values, man has to harness his knowing, feeling and willing capacities, thereby realizes the ultimate true self, which is divine. The original pragmatists are Charles Sanders Peirce, William James, and John Dewey. Pragmatism asserts that the essence of idea is dependent to the outcome. Pragmatists contend that ideas and things are all best viewed in terms of their practical uses and successes. Utility is the test of all truth and reality. An idea is considered a plan of action. Furthermore, ideas are validated in their practical results. The pragmatists perceive man as holistic. He or she constantly interacts which form his or her experience. Furthermore, pragmatists consider man to be inherently creative and constructive. Man is an active participant of his or her world. Therefore, man's intrinsic needs of creativity and activity should be satisfied through application or action. Like any other people, the Filipino has its own consciousness on his life, his world, his belief and his being. This consciousness reflects Filipino philosophy. Drawing from the Filipino consciousness evolved the three dimensions of Filipino thought, which are the loob, gulong ng palad, and bahala na. These attitudes and values constitute the hidden springs of the Filipino mind. The Filipino philosophy of loob is both holistic and interior. Loob's interior dimension is grounded in the belief and trust of the Filipinos in the innate goodness kagandahang loob of the human being. Furthermore, Filipino ethics has an internal code and sanction that flow from within itself. From the interior, the loob is manifested holistically because the philosophy of loob puts one in touch with his fellow beings. As such, basic Filipino values are essentially interpersonal. Kagandahang loob, kabushang loob, and kalooban are Filipino values which manifest sharing of oneself to others. In a nutshell, the Filipino philosophy of loob illustrates the Filipino as individual who looks at himself as holistic from the interior dimension under the principle of harmony. Filipino philosophy of time is clearly illustrated in his belief of the gulong ng palad. The Filipino thought of time is neither about the ticking of the clock nor about being late or delayed, but about life itself with a series of ups and downs. This philosophy of life makes the Filipino hopeful and humble. When the so-called wheel of life is on the downtrend, he looks to the future with hope because life's wheel cannot stay down forever. And when he is up, he reminds himself to be humble because he will not always be on top. Bahala na Filipino philosophy originates from the indigenous Filipino belief of the Supreme Being Bathala. This Filipino mind is Filipinos' personalistic view of the world view, which signifies that ultimately in life, one has to reckon not only with nature and human nature, but also with cosmic origin. The Filipino subconsciously accepts the Bahala na attitude as a life. Bahala na in its sense means leaving everything to God. This philosophy puts complete trust in the divine providence. This mind does not become what may because it is perceived as courage to take risks. In context, the mindset, perspective, and idea of Filipinos as native inhabitants of the Philippines toward daily life, religion, communication, survival, interpersonal relationships, and the cultivation of one's soul, or the Filipino being, are collectively referred to as their Filipino philosophy. Why we remain upright in the face of adversity, be it economic, political, or natural, is explained by our own perspective. The key points of this lesson are: one of the best ways to broaden one's perspective is to explore the tenets of different schools of philosophy. Broadening one's perspective is very significant because the more truth we bring into our lives, the less misinformed we become, and the overall richer our lives become. Man can be able to broaden his perspective through meditation, reflection, learning, socialization, and philosophizing. One of the best ways to broaden one's perspective is to explore the tenets of different schools of philosophy. Traditionally, the schools of philosophy can be categorized into Eastern and Western philosophical thoughts, in which they can be compared with the following attitudinal imperatives: pattern of life and death, distinction of philosophy and religion, acceptance of the validity of intuition with mysticism. Most of the schools of philosophy have their tenets on the human nature, to wit Buddhism illustrates the human person as no self because there is nothing solid or permanent about reality. Confucianism envisions man as a man of virtue. Taoism teaches that human nature is in harmony with nature. The naturalist believes that man is rational and is born with inherent goodness. The idealist looks at man being spiritual as a supreme creation, thus, he or she is endowed with great levels of intelligence and discrimination. The pragmatist considers man as holistic and inherently creative and constructive. The Filipino philosophy basically constitutes of the Loob, Gulong ng Palad, and Bahala na. With this, let us broaden our perspective because it is a wonderful gift we give to ourselves. Thank you and mabuhay.